Time now for Night Court to take a look at this hit. Trey Cardwell says he was clotheslined by a coach while refereeing a high school football game in Nashville, even though officials deemed the incident an accident. Caldwell is now suing that coach and his employer. He's looking for more than $75,000 in damages to help cover medical expenses, lost wages, and mental suffering. Night Court is now in session. You're the jury. Let's bring in trial and family law attorney Lexi Rigdon, along with former prosecutor Steve Baric. Lexi, I will go to you first on this one. This is looking at Outkick.com's write-up on all this. Trey Cardwell was able to finish the game. Once he returned home, he claims to have had trouble breathing, transported to the University of Kentucky's Medical Center intensive care unit. He stayed in the ICU for 4 days to receive treatment and his trachea, according to his attorney, Thomas Carrick. So, you're arguing for the coach here. What about this?
Well, Rich, I think this suit should be sacked. Okay, this was just an accident. And I used to work for a judge who would say, everything in life is either a crime or a compensable event. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that that was absolutely accurate, because this was really just an accident. And regardless of where the coach was standing, let's assume he was standing in the wrong place, the referee still owed a duty of care to the coach and everybody around him. And football is an inherently dangerous sport. So very simply, the referee should have watched where he was going. Because, it's kind of like when you're driving and you might have the right of way, but if somebody hits you, invariably somebody, the insurance company, the police, somebody's going to say that you didn't do enough to prevent that accident and you were also negligent. So I think that also, considering the injuries, the fact that he was able to finish the game and he didn't have those injuries that he needed hospitalization for until after, I'm not so sure how he's going to prevail with this. Yeah,
Steve, you're arguing for the coach here. What about that? It's a football game. There's incidental contact. He's running up and down the sidelines. How can the coach be at fault here?
Well, look, arguing on behalf of the referee, I think the biggest factor here is, and Lexi pointed this out herself, the coach was not in his designated area, the coach's area, and there's a reason that area exists, is to prevent incidents like this from happening. I would argue that he's virtually negligent per se, and when Mr. Caldwell is running down the sideline, his obligation is to watch what's going on in the game. If he's watching what's going on the sidelines, he shouldn't be refereeing the game. So I think the problem that the coach has in this case is, by all accounts, he's outside the designated zone. They create the zone to prevent incidents like this. It may be an accident, but that's the basis of negligence. I mean, he was acting negligently by being outside the coaching zone. Whether what happened was an accident or not, it doesn't matter. And I think that this referee, Mr. Caldwell, is going to prevail. And I'll tell you, a lot of times I do a lot of personal injury cases. A lot of times injuries don't develop until a certain period of time. And so I'm not surprised that Mr. Caldwell, it took him several hours before his injuries to his trachea really started to manifest themselves. But I actually would feel 100% comfortable litigating this case for Mr. Caldwell, and I'd feel confident that we would prevail.
And Lexi, what about that? I mean, these injuries could develop over time.
That's right, and they can, and that's obviously going to be something that is going to be brought up by the plaintiffs, and then something that's going to be brought up by the defense is probably going to be that perhaps he had some type of injury that predated the injury that he had. I mean, that's always the chicken or the egg argument in personal injury cases, is if somebody has a slipped disc because they slipped in a grocery store, another attorney's going to come in and say, hey, wait a minute, didn't you fall off a ladder 5 years ago? So it's always a question of how bad the injuries are, how much the person actually suffered for them with personally suffering and lost wages, and what the injury was truly attributable to.
All right, Steve, last to you here. How does this all wrap up? And can you really get to a good judgment here for your client?
Oh, I feel very confident. I believe that this case, like most cases, will be settled before a trial. But again, not to belabor the point, but I think it's very, very crucial. They create these zones specifically for this purpose. And I think in this case, The injuries inflicted on Mr. Caldwell are consistent with the clotheslining event that occurred to him. They're actually very serious. If you've been clothesline playing sports, it's why, by the way, they banned that kind of tackle in football altogether. They are very dangerous. Again, I'm not saying that the coach did this on purpose, but look, I feel very comfortable litigating this case.
Okay, guys, got to leave it there. Steve Baric, Lexi Rigdon, thanks so much for joining us tonight on Night Court.